So I came across a story. It comes from, I'll pause there, it comes from CNBC, entitled, "Are Companies Quiet Quitting DEI Initiatives?" Of course, I've been hearing about this topic for a little bit now, within just like, I guess, corporate America, corporate culture, whatever the case is. But I've been hearing, what I originally thought was a great idea in terms of DEI. My understanding of what DEI was when I originally came across the term, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion within the workplace, primarily within the workplace. It did sound like something that was for the greater good. I interpreted it as something that was for that kind of even out the playing fields, I guess, programs and initiatives that even out the playing fields for minority workers, right? So, of course, in corporate America, we primarily know that there's certain demographics that are more prevalent in high position roles or roles that are in high demand. We know that even in terms of just like leadership looks a little bit different. Of course, wages, salary looks a little bit different. Opportunities look a little bit different depending on different sectors within the workforce. So all of that is clear as day. And of course, the DEI initiative, when I first heard of it, of course, sounded like something that would maybe even out the playing field. Not solely because a person was a minority or a woman or whatever the case is. It was just being more intentional for people to be able to have an equal chance at some of those roles that we see predominantly overtaken by a certain demographic in the workforce. So I see this video by CNBC entitled, "Are Companies Quiet Quitting DEI Initiatives?" On top of other things that I've been hearing about DEI initiatives, people not necessarily taking them seriously. People think that it's a little bit favoritism or whatever the case is. I do understand that there's been some pushback on that. So let's watch a little bit of this video, get some insight, and we will discuss after this.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, is a term you've probably heard quite a bit.
DEI.
And DEI.
DEI is representation. It's the number of people that you have in the organization that mirror the labor force availability.
The police killing of George Floyd and subsequent protests became a tipping point for companies across America. Fortune 1000 companies publicly acknowledged the importance of racial diversity, pledging $340 billion to promote change. But that is starting to change. The commitment to DEI appears to be wavering.
Squawk, Deere is pulling back from DEI measures.
Technology companies made big cuts to those DEI programs.
Lowe's is the latest company to roll back DEI efforts.
Major players have pulled back their initiatives amid growing conservative pressures, uncertain economic conditions, and a politicization of the practice.
Harley joins Tractor Supply Company and Polaris in scaling back or changing DEI policies following a campaign by activist Robbie Starbuck.
Well, there's a new player in the marketplace, and that is the conservative consumer who has woken up to the fact that many companies have divorced from the idea that customers are king.
But DEI advocates argue that this retreat may be overstated. Is it the normal ebb and flow of social initiatives, or is there a shift in corporate culture?
Pause right there real quick. So of course you guys heard basically what I was kind of saying, alluding to before. Basically just the idea that in corporate America, DEI initiatives, again, diversity, equity, and inclusion, was just a measure used to see to it that minorities or people of certain demographics had an equal opportunity within the workforce. The whole concept of this now, of course, you saw in that intro there, looks like a lot of people are maybe scaling back those initiatives. Companies are maybe cutting their budgets, so budgets that they maybe had towards this initiative. Looks like as of maybe like 2023, there was an uptick in companies that were scaling back on these DEI initiatives within their workforce, which I always thought was interesting because, again, when I originally heard of DEI, I thought it was something that was good. Because again, if we just think, especially let's speak specifically in the tech space, which is I'm the most familiar with. I would say, a lot of positions, of course, are held by. There's not a lot of people. In my personal experience that I've seen, and other experiences that I've seen, in other industries and other companies, it's not as diverse as some would like to think, right? In a situation where I would think that a lot of people will just be looking solely off of criteria, because that's my whole thing as well too. And I think that's the pushback I see a lot with this whole DEI thing. is that people are maybe, it comes off as maybe being favorites, or that, oh, you're getting this role solely because you're a woman, or you're getting this role solely because you're African American or Indian or whatever you are. And it seems to kind of diminish the actual qualifications of those people. Whereas I thought DEI originally started off as something that was more so, hey, you guys are qualified, but because of the structure, the corporate structure, or I guess let's just call it the norm within these spaces, you're maybe getting overlooked for a position that you are indeed suited for. I think a lot of the times, especially I was seeing things in terms of just like DEI initiatives for pilots, who fly planes and things of that nature. I think people were saying, oh, these are DEI specialists or DEI pilots, whereas they only got the role solely because of their demographic, as opposed to not the skill set, which I always thought was interesting. Because I would think with any type of field, in order for you to get that job, the first criteria is going to be, can you do the actual job, right? Then, of course, you could take into consideration a person's, salary, location, whatever the case is, and specifically within DEI. So it's just like, I always thought, like, to my understanding, DEI was a good thing when I first heard of it, and I still kind of think that's way, unless I'm misinformed about something. I always thought DEI was a good thing because, again, it just kind of made a conscious attempt to put people of different minorities, different backgrounds within the same spaces, along with their qualifications, right, in certain positions of certain opportunities that they might have maybe previously got overlooked for. So let's watch a little bit more, see if there's any more context.
It's the number of people that you have in the organization that mirror the labor force availability.
When we're challenged with growth opportunities, we're often told to think bigger. You've got to think bigger. Well, you in and of yourself and your existing team in your existing structure can't think bigger without new perspectives. And that's what leading bigger is widening your perspective by including others.
Despite challenges, a 2024 study found 75% of U.S. executives highly prioritize DEI, and those executives are being more vocal about their support. In a letter to shareholders, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon said that the initiatives are driving inclusivity, innovation, and stronger financial performance. And MasterCard's chief administrative officer acknowledged the company's continued commitment to equality and fairness. Diversity among CEOs is also improving, with more women, Black, Asian, and Latino people occupying the position since 2019.
Let's pause right there. So exactly that, man. Percentage of total CEOs employed, right? So again, in certain spaces, man, we know CEOs to look a certain type of way. Let's just keep it real. Like in most companies, again, depending on the sector, what the case, but in most, let's say maybe Fortune 500 companies or whatever the case is, it's only a specific demographic of people that you see in these titles. Whereas it looks like these DEI initiatives, the push for it, actually did see an uptick. It looks like from these numbers here. Where's the source? The Bureau of Labor Statistics shares this chart here in terms of the uptick in different demographics of CEOs. So of course for women, it looks like it was an increase about 3%. Percentage of women employed went up from 2019 to 2023. Black, Asian, Hispanic, Latino, of course, you see an uptick in those numbers when there was an original push, I guess, for DEI initiatives, which I thought, again, was a good thing. So I just don't know when it became a bad thing and why people are scaling down from these opportunities. I'm maybe not as versed or educated as to the why, the pushback. But I have been seeing a lot of pushback within certain mainstream conversations, whereas they're looking at DEI initiatives as something that's bad. When did DEI initiatives become something that was bad? I'm not too sure. So let's maybe get some more insight, I guess. I want to watch the full thing, but let's see.
Over 70% of leaders choose proteges that are of the same race and gender. We like comfortable, we gravitate to comfortable, but what we have to realize in today's world and tomorrow's future, comfort means stagnation. It means a lack of change, a lack of forward movement.
So if you look around the room and everybody who's sitting there is a white male, and you're trying to sell products to a multiracial world marketplace, and you don't have anybody who represents that thinking, then you're probably not going to do very well in the marketplace.
DEI advocates point to several benefits, including improved innovation, recruitment, and company reputation.
We say we don't want to have people figure out how they fit in. We want to help people figure out how they stand out.
In 2023, more than 75% of companies in the S&P 500 use DEI metrics in the pay of CEOs and other C-suite executives. Still, less than half of U.S. corporate employees say their executive teams reflect the diversity of their employees in 2024. One of the problems with diversity initiatives is getting shareholders on board, especially when it is hard to translate to dollars.
Let's pause right there. DEI under fire. Before they get into that part, that's the main part I wanted to get into. So yeah, exactly that. And then the lady said it. I was trying to keep it light, but yeah, man, let's just keep it a buck, man. If all these companies are predominantly ran by white men, I feel like there's only you're limiting yourself to a certain perspective depending on who your core audience is. Of course, a lot of these companies, again, whether it's the tech industry, whatever industry, man, film. I mean, I feel like all of this, the whole DEI initiative kind of spreads to a lot of different sectors. But if we're just talking about corporate America specifically, let's talk within the tech space. I guess that's just where I'm kind of a little bit more versed. Yeah, man. Like how do we innovate if you look like me, you think like me, you know, I think you saw the percentage there as well too. 70% of, was it 70% or is it 30%? I forgot. People are usually more likely to hire people that look like them. But how do we diversify? How do we get different perspectives? How do we, you know, get different POVs from people that are, how do we, you know, champion the idea of innovation if everybody has the same ideas? If everybody looks like you, talks like you, is from the same background as you. So again, I thought DEI was a good thing. Looks like the next portion of this video is DEI under fire. Why has it gone under fire is what I'm trying to figure out. What went left? I don't understand. Why are companies scaling back their budgets for these programs where one would argue that innovation is a good thing, right? Diversifying your palette, as I always like to say, is a good thing. Let's find out.
In recent years, DEI efforts have seen an uptick in pushback, and more than 100 bills have been introduced in 30 states aimed at restricting these initiatives. And some executives are increasingly wary of taking public stances on social issues, which could cause legal risks to businesses. 9 in 10 executives believe taking a public stance on a social issue is riskier than staying silent, according to one study.
It's a broader
9 in 10 executives believe taking a public stance on social issues is riskier than staying silent. And this is the problem. How do we bring forth change if people are afraid to speak up? People are in positions of power afraid to speak up. 9 in 10 executives believe taking a public stance on a social issue is riskier than staying silent. So perfect example of things that I think of is like who I think, you know, Nike sometimes does a good job speaking up on social issues. They have to, because Nike is an international brand, so it'll be foolish for them to stay silent on certain things. I do understand to a degree of just like, I do, but I don't, which is kind of, I'm on the fence, but I understand. I think there's a time and place to say certain things and do certain things, especially as a company, as an institution. And maybe I'm a little bit biased because I am somebody who doesn't mind speaking up on social issues. Clearly, if you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you understand that, yeah, that's kind of what I do. You know, using my platform as big or small as it may be to speak up on social issues. So this number jumps out to me where it says 9 in 10 executives believe taking a public stance on a social issue is riskier than staying silent. Why? Because they don't want to mess up the money. They don't want to mess up the dollars that's coming in, man, because of course, yeah, people got to be employed. People got to, you know, there's bills to pay, this, that, and the other, and, you know, larger initiatives. Yeah, I get that. But at the same time, doesn't it feel good to, you know, and unless we're saying that there's gray areas in these social issues, a lot of the times I don't think there is any gray area. But it's just interesting to see that stat. And again, these numbers are coming from, where did this stat come from? C-suite executives on DEI and when to take a stand. Survey of 600 C-suite executives of companies with over 500 employees, right? So it looks like they had a decent data pool to get these numbers. So some people believe, hey, man, it's risky business if we speak out on this as opposed to just keeping our mouth shut and making sure the money keeps coming in. Again, to each his own. Let's watch a little bit more.
Swath of Americans who are just sick of all the divisive woke stuff. They just want to be able to exist in the marketplace.
Recently, several major publicly traded companies and household names, including Tractor Supply.
So Tractor Supply, John Deere, Motor, Harley Davidson, of course, Ford and Lowe's have cut their budgets.
John Deere, Harley Davidson, Ford, and Lowe's scaled back their DEI policies.
As we look down that list of most trusted brands by conservatives in America, we realized they all had these policies, and they were all opposed to the fundamental values and tenets and beliefs of conservative consumers.
Robbie Starbuck has over 1 million followers across his social media platforms and has been able to galvanize conservative consumers.
So there's a real financial incentive for companies to look and take very seriously what we're saying and pull back where it's appropriate to pull back.
More people now have permission to be, quote, anti-DEI. And I think that for those organizations, they probably were already only doing it because they felt it was the socially acceptable thing to do. So they really weren't doing it because they saw this as a critical aspect of their business success.
U.S. companies spend an average of $8 billion a year on DEI. Training can be costly, ranging from a couple $1,000s to well over $1 million, depending on company size.
The DEI departments at large have cost quite a bit of money and have borne very little fruit.
The budgets are definitely being cut. We do find that in this era where there's so much backlash, we do find that organizations' budgets, have been cut.
Although business leaders are supporters of DEI initiatives, shareholders and board members are far less likely to prioritize it.
Let's pause right there. Of course, it looks like they're gonna, kind of tie it all in. The question I present to, I guess, anybody is, what's the solution then? What's the solution? Because to me, it sounds like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, man. Like, let's just keep letting, white men, and again, I don't have any problem with white men, but it's just like, yeah, man, let's just keep them in position, man. Let's just keep the money flowing, man. We don't need more minorities in leadership roles. We don't need more minorities in these companies. But then how do we innovate? You see what I'm saying? A lot of these companies, your target audience is not white men. It's everyone. It's consumers, right? So doesn't it make sense to have more and more people that don't fit that demographic, right? That are not, I should say, that are minorities, whether they be handicapped, of course, because you got to understand this includes a lot of different, it's not just, races in particular, of course. So it's advocating for more women. It's advocating for more, people who maybe have illnesses, whatever the case is, or disabilities, things of that nature. So it's just making sure everybody has an equal playing chance at some of these roles, man. If all the CEOs across these, these companies all look the same and think the same and talk the same and have the same ideologies, what does that mean for the consumer? What is it? Who's and again, this goes back to the conversation I had before in terms about the totem pole. Remember what I told y'all? This goes back to the conversation about the totem pole, and ask yourself, where do you stand if you're not a white man? You see what I'm saying? So this kind of just validates that point that I was kind of saying, that it's about money and power and influence from a structure that's been, I guess you could say, working to these people for a long period of time. So to me, it just sounds like, man, let's come back on all this DEI stuff because it's costing us too much money. We don't want to get our hands tied with any social issues. That's going to mess up the bread. That's going to mess up the money. So let's not, as a company, we got stakeholders to please. And I hear that so often. The stakeholders, man, the shareholders, man. We got to make sure, blah, blah, blah. So let's, take our foot off the gas on some of these initiatives, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's just keep having these mundane conversations and mundane people in positions of power and not having other, people have a fair chance who are just as qualified. I think, again, a lot of people think that these DEI programs are just a way to get people who are not qualified into these roles. That's not the case at all. A lot of these women are qualified. A lot of these minorities, whether you be Black, Asian, whatever you are, Hispanic, like, you're just as qualified. You went to school too, depending on the role, right? You got the certification. You know what you're talking about just as much as these other people do. So why is there not an equal chance or an equal opportunity within some of these workforces? That's what I thought DEI was here to do. That's what I thought the whole point of DEI initiatives was. But again, some people are now just blatantly saying, no, it's a waste, it's favoritism, it's this, that, and the other. I don't really know. Of course, I want to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below, folks. What do you make of this, man? Is DEI a good thing or a bad thing? I think that's just what we're trying to figure out. Is DEI, the DEI programs, again, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is seeing it to it that other different minorities have a fair chance at some of these roles within these Fortune 500 companies, or just companies in general? Is it a bad thing to have programs that put to the forefront the intentionality of making sure that these people have a fair chance for these roles, whether it be a CEO position, a leadership role, even just regular staff, regular just mid-level, associate level as well too? They're more likely to give you that. Like, again, back to the totem pole. Yeah, the little guys, yeah, you guys can have you guys are the gears that make everything run. But in terms of these leadership roles and the CEO roles, it looks to be one certain demographic that is predominant in those spaces. And I thought DEI was one of those initiatives that gave everybody a fair chance. That's just my thought. Of course, you feel free to educate me a little bit more if you're a little bit more well-versed in this sector, to let me know your thoughts on DEI programs and why companies seem to be scaling back. As always, the likes, the comments, the subscribes are all greatly appreciated. Let's get into the next one.